Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Robin Eggar, Group Chief Commercial Officer here at Brooks Macdonald, and I'm delighted to be joined today by three colleagues from across the broader Brooks Macdonald Group, and indeed two from companies we very recently acquired. So the expertise today is going to be provided by Guy, by Kerry, and by Dan, and I'm delighted to have them on the call today. Now, they say a week is a long time in politics. And yes, it is only a week since the budget was announced here in the UK. Of course, we've had the small matter of the US presidential election to contend with in between. But back to the budget today. Now, clearly, some of the dust has settled, and importantly, some of the planning opportunities are becoming clearer. And we're here today to talk through some of those key topics in a little more detail and to really highlight some of those key considerations for clients and importantly, what we need to be doing for them as a result of those considerations. So broadly speaking, we've got four topics today we're going to cover: IHT in its broader sense, as well as including things like business property relief, pensions, national insurance contributions, and CGT, and clear the impacts around all of those. So kicking off with IHT in the broader sense, Guy, do you want to talk us through the technical changes and indeed some of the things that haven't changed as well?
Of course, of course. Yes, I mean, it was one of the longest budget speeches in living memory. There was a load of information and a lot of detail to follow. So, and which we'll have to go through over time. So I'm sure we'll have future presentations like this because we will learn more as we go along. But one of the key areas, as Robin alluded to, was inheritance tax. The frozen inheritance tax allowances have been extended to 2030 from 2028. So by definition, more people will fall into the inheritance tax net for inflationary purposes alone. But I think one of the big announcements that we came across was that from April 2026, agricultural relief and business relief assets are being reformed. So under the new rules, only the first £1 million of business relief and agricultural relief assets will benefit from 100% inheritance tax relief. Anything over the million will benefit from 50% relief from inheritance tax. With regards to AIM shares, they'll have a reduction from 100% relief from inheritance tax to 50% relief from inheritance tax moving forwards, or from 2026. The government will be publishing a technical consultation in early January, and that's really going to be focusing on the way that agricultural and business relief will apply to property held in trust. So again, we'll learn more about that early next year. So Kerry and Dan, have you any initial thoughts about these changes that are going to come in 2026 and any ideas moving forward from an advice issue?
I think from everyone's perspective, in some ways it's disappointing, particularly for the business property relief and for the agricultural property relief. They were originally there for family businesses, past farms through the generations, and the value of land and keeping those businesses alive, that will become more challenging. Now, we have time on our hands. We've got 18 months before this comes in. So for myself and my clients, it's a case of let's wait and see this detail and then take some really sensible planning advice once we know the facts. Dan, I don't know whether or not you're in agreement with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the initial knee-jerk reaction from some clients has been, let's calm down. It's obviously disappointing that these reliefs have been limited, but there are lots of other planning opportunities that we can use to take advantage of various other reliefs and structures and various different bits and pieces. So it's kind of, let's calm down, let's see the consultation through to January, let's see what the actual finer details are, because with all these things, the announcement that an hour and 20 minutes she was speaking for, something like that, she could probably speak for an hour and 20 minutes on this relief alone. So it's waiting for the finer details and really just working through what the options are.
And that's a key point, as you both allude to, not panicking, not moving into rush decisions. As you say, the consultation periods will now commence. Do clients get that point in terms of, yes, we can plan, but let's just take a step back and wait for those finer details?
I think it depends how they've invested, to be honest. So for business property relief, if you have an investment portfolio that qualifies, not many clients will have portfolios in excess of £1 million. So you should, assuming everything goes to plan with the consultation, be okay. And that still may be appropriate. Likewise with AIM shares. Yes, it's a shame that the relief has come down, but actually that's a far better outcome than any of us were expecting in that area. And for the right clients, if you need access and if you need control, and that's still the right investment for you, and you don't want the complexities of trusts or to bring other people in and to sort of pass that control, then that still may be appropriate. You still do get a relief and it still does help. So for me, the reactions have been more a case of how emotional, so more on the agricultural side, whereas family farm and the worry over how that will succeed down the generations, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. As you say, all client circumstances are individual, therefore the rules must be applied for them. It's interesting you mentioned the point on the generational relief for agricultural land and farms, as you say. There's been a lot of column inches on that. I think one area that perhaps took people a little bit more by surprise, albeit we were maybe expecting changes with regard to pensions, was that potential change to the inheritance tax treatment of pensions themselves. Guy, do you want to go through that in a little bit more detail for us?
Yeah. I mean, pensions, it's funny because you talk about knee-jerk reactions as well. And pensions is a perfect example of that. You know, before the budget, there was a massive rumour and discussion about what was going to happen. It was, will tax-free cash be capped at 150,000 or 100,000? Will they tinker with tax relief? Will they change the annual allowance? And of course, they did nothing in respect of that. And I was actually talking to one provider, and he was saying they saw a really large uptick in requests from clients for tax-free cash before the budget.
Yeah.
You know, and but he did go on to say that the majority of those clients were non-advised. They didn't have an advisor, which I think speaks volumes at times like this, when people do start to worry and panic and take silly decisions over rumours. But your question was about the inheritance tax on pensions moving forward, and it's huge. So with effect from April 2027, when a pension member dies with unused pensions, they will fall into his estate for inheritance tax purposes. And at the moment, that's not the case for the majority of pension benefits. They pass on to future generations free of inheritance tax. So that is really a large change. But interestingly, the existing rules are remaining about income tax on inherited pension benefits. So if a member dies before the age of 75, then the inherited benefits are free of income tax. If that member is over the age of 75, then it is subject to income tax, which means that, I mean, the HMRC published some case studies, and it shows that if a member is over the age of 75, then 40% IHT would apply if applicable first, and then that will be followed by the income tax charge. So for those over 75 who pass away with unused benefits, it's almost double tax whammy. But we don't know all the detail yet, which again goes back to exactly as Dan was saying. The technical consultation is underway. A lot of that seems to be focusing on which and how to put the changes into play, how to implement the changes. But we'll see more next year again. We'll find out a lot more about this. But again, Kerry and Dan, initial thoughts for effects on clients and implications.
Yeah, well, I think this has been one of the biggest changes personally for our clients. I mean, we encourage people to actively contribute into their pensions as of the great tax breaks that you get on the way in, during, and on the way out. And as an extra kicker, for most people, it was this inheritance tax-free nature of whatever was left in there. So there's a number of cases and clients where that has been the primary inheritance tax plan, and we're having to look and revisit those things. But again, it's calm down, it's okay. We've got 2 years over 2 years to start to plan for these changes. We don't know exactly what it looks like, but if you are concerned and worried, just speak to somebody and get some real good financial planning and advice. I mean, Kerry, have you had anything similar with clients?
Yeah, I think for me it's a case of remembering that whilst we've enjoyed nigh on 10 years of IHT, well, pensions have always predominantly been IHT free, but we've had some very, very preferential tax situation on death since 2015, since freedoms came in. So although the latest proposal is a lot more convoluted and slightly more complex based on the consultation, which feels unnecessary in terms of the practical administration, but we'll see what comes out in the spring. I think it is important to remember why we have pensions in the first place. It's not just about the death benefits. That is certainly an attractive outcome. You know, you've got very generous annual allowance of 60,000. That does reduce if you're a significantly high earner. Whilst your money is invested, it's free of income tax, it's free of capital gains tax, you know, and you have still, you know, got some very flexible extraction methods. So I think it's a case of go back to the plan. If you're in retirement or coming up to retirement, sit with your financial planner, look at how you're extracting your income. Do you need to go back to the more traditional model and think about where your money is coming from, taking into account the different allowances? You know, we didn't see any changes to dividend allowances or savings allowances, anything like that in the budget, which was welcome. And as I say, it's about getting that advice. It's not about going, well, I'll take all my tax-free cash immediately. Because if you're 74, you take your 300,000, you place that, 268,000, you place that in your estate. That is 100% subject to inheritance tax today. We have 3 years before this comes into effect. You know, going back to what we were saying earlier with the inheritance tax, we do need to see that fine detail. We need to understand how this is going to be practically implemented, how your nil rate bands are going to be shared across your pensions and your free estate. You know, there will be exceptional circumstances where decisions are going to have to be taken now, but those should be exceptionals. You know, if you've got a good relation with your professional advisor, sit down, talk about it, the review, talk about the ramifications, and go back to basics, understand what matters to you. You know, is it about passing on to the next generation, in which case maybe pensions aren't the correct tool anymore? Is it about your lifetime taxes, or is it a blend of both? But, you know, the tax should never rule all decision makings.
Yeah.
Where are you trying to get?
It seems to me that again, going back to those knee-jerk reactions, there's been some comment, oh my gosh, I was never going to touch my pension. I now need to get that income out as quickly as I possibly can. But it's not that simple, right? We need to be going back to basics and looking at that plan and perhaps the mix of assets of how you draw that income in retirement might change. But as you say, Kerry, going back to what was the pension originally designed to do? Well, it was to provide an income in retirement. So perhaps we've had a period where we've slightly forgotten that and focused on the inheritance tax benefits. So yeah, again, lots and lots of planning opportunities. And I'm assuming particularly for clients with multiple different investment pots, etc., that's going to be even more important.
Yeah, and I think it's also remembering that although obviously the death tax on pensions is changing, there are still ways to pass money through pensions to the younger generations. You can fund pensions for grandchildren. You know, a baby can have a pension and have tax relief. That hasn't changed. So if you have excess income, or you have the capability to efficiently take extra income from your pension and pass that straight through, that's a great inheritance tax relief. So it isn't just responding in a panic and taking everything out. It's thinking sensibly and logically about what you're trying to achieve.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we always talk about kind of the toolbox that we have at our disposal to achieve something for somebody. So and Kerry is exactly the same. We'll sit down with somebody and first of all try and understand what they want to achieve before we start getting into these the technical aspects of things. But the toolbox ultimately changes every now and then with the change of rules, but there is always still a toolbox to help somebody achieve what they actually want to achieve. And that's kind of a key message is the rules will always change. There's going to be a new government generally every 5 years. The rules will probably change every 5 years. It's just a case of taking stock, understanding the rules, and just putting the best plan in place that you can, really.
Yeah. I think that's why flexibility is so important, having different tax wrappers.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, we don't know what the tax landscape will be in 5, 6, 8 years, 15 years time. And that could be when the client wants to access the money.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So we leave flexible, lots of tax wrappers, then it gives
flexibility and planning. And I think that the multiple tax wrappers, I think we'll come back to, Guy. I think that's a really interesting point. Before we do that, though, just when we talk about pensions, we talk about taking money out of pensions. Clearly, there's still going to be some benefits to putting money into pensions in terms of national insurance contributions, salary exchange, etc. Is there dramatic change there, or just worth something bearing in mind still?
No, 100%. I mean, it was widely reported, wasn't it, before the budget, that it was the tax burden was going to fall on the broader shoulders, which happens to be the corporate world. And so from April 25, national insurance is going to increase for the employer from 13.8 to 15%. And they've also reduced the threshold that when the national insurance is paid. So again, I was going to ask Kerry and Dan what they thought about that, but you're absolutely right, Robin. I think 40% of workplace schemes in the UK use salary sacrifice.
Yeah, and I think it's a really fantastic way of contributing to a pension. It is more and more important that people take responsibility for their own retirement. I think that's quite clear. Not many people would be comfortable surviving on the basic state pension. Automatic enrolment has gone a decent way to helping, and having that extra 1.2% if you operate a salary exchange stream through your workplace pension, and assuming your employer allows you to keep that reduction, that's an extra 1.2% going into your pension within your eligible bandings, and that's only a positive thing. And as I go back to what I said, there's no income tax while it's invested, there's no capital gains tax invested, and the rules as they are currently are pretty darn flexible in how you take those out. The average person doesn't really start saving early enough. Again, automatic enrolment is a real positive with that. Now, you mentioned, was it 40%, Guy, of schemes operate salary exchange?
Yeah.
And this is a real opportunity for employers to, make sure their staff are getting their maximum for the benefit. Pension contributions are corporation tax deductible, so that's, a good thing for the employer. But ultimately, the national insurance rise is adding a cost to the bottom line, and there may be unintended consequences that come out of that with staff. So we'll have to watch this space on that one.
Yeah. I think it's a very key point that a lot of workplaces and HR managers don't really grasp, is that putting a salary exchange scheme in place actually saves the business money, depending on how much of the NI saving they give back. So there's been a couple of cases where it's been an 800-person company, so the NI saving by changing the scheme has been absolutely huge. So it's a very important thing to be aware of, really.
Yeah.
Excellent. As you say, we're talking about taking money out of pensions, but let's not forget getting money into them in the first place. And the most efficient way of doing that is equally key for a successful retirement. I think the last point that we had on our list for today was around CGT. And again, Guy, perhaps not the dramatic changes people were expecting, but nonetheless changes, and how that might impact things going forward from an investment perspective.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it was well signposted, wasn't it? It was expected, and actually what happened was probably better than we expected. So very simply, it's with immediate effect from the budget. The main rates of CGT have increased. So for basic rate taxpayers, it goes from 10% to 18%, and for higher rate taxpayers from 20% to 24%. Really, it kind of goes back, I think, to the fact that the taxation system in the UK is very complicated. It's constantly evolving. And this is a perfect example. And it's that importance of having multiple tax wrappers or multiple products. Again, I'll be interested in what Kerry and Dan's thoughts are.
We were expecting the capital gains tax rates to go up. Everyone does have an exemption, and for a lot of people that is more than enough. If you have a sort of smaller share portfolio, you can have 3,000 of profits. That has come down dramatically in recent years from its more generous levels. I don't think any of us are expecting that to go back up again. But it is still lower rates than income tax, which is 20, 40 and 45%. So I think there still is a place for those assets within a multiple tax wrapper portfolio. And it's about managing that effectively and working with your advisor and making sure you're not disposing of assets and accidentally causing a large gain when you could perhaps trickle those out over a number of years and use other assets where needed. So the importance of advice is still there in that space. I think the other big change was over business asset disposal relief. Obviously, we've got some changes there as well, which again sort of fits into that broader shoulder that you mentioned earlier, Guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's going from 10% as effective rate, which is where it is at the moment, to 14 next year and 18 year after that. So in line with the basic rate taxpayers. And again, there are allowances that you'll need to sit within, and eligibility rules. So again, you'll need to take advice depending on what you own.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, as Kerry said, I mean, it was probably one of the most obvious ones that it was going to change, and the change wasn't going to be a good one. It was going to only head in one direction. So, spending the months since the election up to the budget, we'd been realising profits in every portfolio and every kind of structure that we are allowed to realise gains in, because it felt like it was never going to get any better, and it could have been a lot worse than it was. But actually, it was probably at the lower end of my expectations, and I was pretty positive compared to some of the national papers and things of where it was going to head. So in terms of general thinking of investing money outside of your ISA, pension and other tax efficient wrappers, I think it hasn't particularly changed with these new rates. I think it stays exactly the same as it was 6 months ago, really.
Yeah, again, before the budget, a lot of talk of maybe offshore bonds coming back to the fore again if capital gains tax had moved. Do you see people using those more perhaps, or is it again just part of the toolbox for the right client? It might be appropriate.
Part of the toolbox for me, and it always has been. I mentioned some other reliefs earlier, sort of dividend allowances, savings allowances. We've got capital gains tax allowances. There are a lot of allowances at your disposal. So if you're only putting your eggs in the pension basket or in the ISA basket, you're not being effective with your planning. And it's going back to what we said earlier. What are you trying to achieve? Where are you trying to go? How much money do you need? What have we got to work with? Making sure everything is flexible. And that is the key point. You need to be able to maneuver depending on what happens in the budget from last week, and obviously future budgets, because things will continue to evolve. And it's sitting down and regularly reviewing that. So for my clients, I'll be sitting down with them, and I have sat down with them and said, has anything changed in your personal plan? If the answer is no, we have things like on and offshore investment bonds, we have ISAs, we have general accounts, we have pensions. And what that does is give us that maneuverability to switch and rebalance and restructure as needs require.
No, that makes perfect sense.
I think just to quickly add it in there as well, it's as if you have that vast toolbox, you can almost allocate the riskier assets in the more tax advantageous accounts, and the less riskier assets in the ones that are more taxable. So your upside is that would be taxed is much lower, and the places where you have much higher upside is tax free. I think is a really important point to make, and something you should definitely speak to your advisor about.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, listen, guys, I really appreciate your time and your expertise today. I think as we've said a number of times that there clearly were changes in the budget. Now, some of those perhaps were less bad than people had feared, and perhaps less impactful. But nonetheless, what's been absolutely clear to me from all of these comments is the absolute importance of taking proper advice. You may say we're biased to that, but it's absolutely true. And the point you made just there, Kerry, it's about sitting down with the client and their personal plan. The personalisation of this is absolutely key. The rules apply to everybody, clearly, and the budget applies to everyone, but how that impacts their situation, what they're trying to achieve, the tax wrappers they have, the tools in your toolbox will be unique to them. So the importance of that advice, the importance of the reviewing that plan on a regular basis, and as we started with, the importance of not making a knee-jerk reaction now on the back of the news from the budget, not the least because some of the consultation periods are not even concluded yet. So we don't necessarily know the full detail of what's to come. But when we do, absolutely, sitting down with your advisor, going through your plan and ensuring it's as efficient as possible for the future, so that you can, with them, deliver the plan for their financial security. So thank you very much again. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And thank you to Dan, Kerry and Guy for their expertise. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.